Jim, let me ask you. So now you didn't have to go through the same things that Tim did, and you obviously weren't subject to the same kind of exposure, but you had to play this role and you had to act out in your imagination the darkness that characterized the people who played your enemies, let's say, on the screen. What were the consequences for you of having to delve even on the fictional landscape into this entire, what would you say, underworld domain?
Well, let's start with your story initially when you brought up Cain and Abel. In my years of working with agents like Tim, and I actually worked with other agents because Tim was very busy doing missions at the time, and I got to go into a lot of his world. I mean, those are the guys that I play, so I don't imitate other actors. I go and meet these guys and really learn and study what they do. Cain and Abel, for example, Abel is doing good things for God. How would Cain hurt God? By killing Abel, by wounding him. When I go and play, for example, a serial killer or a man that you mentioned earlier, Ted Bundy, who my friend broke that case and found out who he was, Mike Tando. So you're the beast that comes in you. He comes in and he deceives you and starts with the ego and the whole thing. And then eventually the turn is how that you're eventually not fair, non-serviam, becomes one who, how can I wound God the most? By killing the most innocent child. And it wounds God in the greatest way when you take these innocent children who've done nothing and have no sin. And these guys have the attitude, which you were mentioning earlier, all the cutting of the corners and whatnot. And ultimately, they can kill the most innocent and effectively wounds God's heart the most. I spent a great deal of time. I did this movie, Deja Vu, and I played a Unabomber. And I was on the phone with a friend of mine who broke the case, and Ted Bundy, and I talked to him a lot about serial killers. And then I got to look at the FBI and the ATF gave me through Jerry Bruckheimer and Tony Scott. I got all these videos to look at, and I was looking at Unabombers, guys that blow things up, and actual serial killers, but it was written more like a Ted Bundy, and not a man who was writing Destiny and all of these things that he would exchange his life to take out whoever they want to take out, but the voice was very similar, and so I don't go to Satan to play. In this particular story, I play this guy, this bomber, and I don't go to the devil to play the devil. I think many actors make that mistake. Go to God to tell you who the devil is. That's what I do, and it also gives me a protection.
What's the difference? What's the difference, Jim? Because that also bears on how you protect yourself from such things.
And are you saying the difference in the difference is that I play the truth. So if you go to the devil to play the devil will deceive you and put something up there that deceives the public. He'll always try to hide in the shadow. He'll always try, because he doesn't like the light, even though he's called the light, the illuminator, Lucifer. And he tries to mimic God. He tries to be like God. So there's always if God has love, and what we see as love, he creates lust. He's always trying to be like that. It's like Cain trying to rip off Abel, cutting the corners. And so committing to.
There's a tendency, even in Milton's in Milton's Paradise Lost, there's been two readings of that forever, and one of them is that Milton's Satan is an anti-hero of the most profound sort, really the embodiment of evil, and the other reading is that Milton's Satan is a disguised hero and the eternal, what would you say, the eternal rebel against established order and someone to emulate in consequence, and that Milton somehow knew that and was coding that, not precisely secretly, but subtly. And I think that's a huge mistake. I mean, I've familiarized myself with Paradise Lost, and I think that Milton was an extraordinarily subtle writer and that he got everything as right as anyone ever has. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because, so this is a complicated thing to untangle, but one of the things you see in Hollywood portrayals of villains, you saw this in The Silence of the Lambs, you see it frequently in mafia portrayals, is that the villain is inadvertently or even sometimes purposefully glorified. And it's partly because he's a rule breaker and has the attraction that goes along with that. But I also wonder too if it has something to do with what you were describing, is that the writers and the actors find themselves, when they're trying to portray evil, pulled towards falseness in that representation as part of the proclivity of evil to hide itself. And the danger in that is twofold. And one is the danger of deceiving the public as to the true nature of evil, because there's nothing heroic about it, quite the contrary. And the second danger I wonder about, there's all this speculation about Heath Ledger and the consequences that for him of having played the Joker in such a dark manner. And, I don't know what to make of that, although I do think there is some danger in having to journey down a path of emulating evil in order to represent it. Now, you said that you turned to God, so to speak, to protect yourself against false representations of evil, but also in some ways to shield yourself. And it sounds to me reminiscent of what Tim's superiors mentioned to him when they said to him that his faith might protect him
I love his question.
From what was... Okay, go ahead, man.
This is the best interview I've ever had in my life. I love your line of questioning and getting to what is real. My job is to give what I know to be absolutely certain and real. I hooked into Tim, has a childlike quality to him, and I stay with that innocence, and don't take that innocence as weakness. So when I read the scripture, I feel truth, good, evil, and I find the good, and let that just pierce the darkness. And it has to pierce. And I know what that light is. And I know that deception, that when I start hearing about, for example, in your life, there's two masters here. One is from the evil, wicked side, but he comes in through your ego. And the other one is the light side that tells you what you might not want to hear, but you ought to hear. And it's not manipulative. It's truth. So I go to that side, then I pray, then I go through it. Like the Passion of the Christ, I looked at the Shroud of Turin. And there were two men, Christian Tinsley and Keith Vanderlyn, who are experts in makeup. And both of these men were agnostic. And they looked at the shroud that Mel Gibson presented to them. And one particular way, the way it is through the negative, however they were able to show it, you can see the track lines of Jesus. You can see the actual bamboo sticks that they used to initially hit him. And then you see the cat o' nine tails, the track lines. They look like the Grand Canyon in your skin. And it shocked them. Now, these guys look at everything from decapitations, murders, and everything. Prior to this, I did a movie a long time ago in New York, and I was with homicide. And I got to see the contortion of a face when someone gets murdered. And it's hard to watch. But when you start going into this, which is children, there is something that I can't even fathom, even with the protection of Almighty God, because it took me 2 years to get over this. 2 years, and a friend of mine, Debbie, came into the room, and at around 3:00 in the middle of the night, I was in a chair, and she heard me just weeping. Now, I would go into these black holes, and I have no idea. I don't remember it, but this was all of the screaming that I had to hear. I didn't want to hear it, but I had to hear it. And then I was able to transform that into the movie that you just saw when I asked Alejandro Monteverdi to move our DP to take it and show him my eyeball so you would see a 20-foot eye to see what Tim goes through to rip his heart out. Now, it's not like this is what I want to experience any more than I want to get on a cross and have my heart broken. I went through hypothermia. I had to have open heart surgery. I was electrocuted, struck by lightning. I understand the necessity of what I was going to have to go through could help bring people back to God, to wake them up. And quite frankly, more people now, Jordan, are more afraid of the devil than they are of God because they want a happy Jesus. And the problem is that eventually, Jordan, we all are going to die. Eventually that is going to happen. But people, the power of the devil deceives to say, no, you're going to be around for a long, long time. And they never wake up. And eventually there is a judgment, and then you have to decide, or God decides, not how you want to see yourself anymore, but how God sees you. And how God sees you is who you really are. And so that's how I chose to go at this particular case. I had no choice but to go in. And I hear the screams in my heart. I hear the screams because of the agents that I got to work with, got to show me things. And one particular time, he says, "Are you sure you want to go further?" But I was weeping so hard. I said, this is what Tim goes through. This is what I got. I got to see it in order to go into there, to take people to a level of, will you do something? Will you do something? At some point, it ends for all of us. And so the pain in my heart is much better than the pain in the future. And if I have to see that to save my children, to motivate me to save my niece, to tell my sister, no, walking home at 13 years old from school is not a good choice. Not a good choice. My sister says to me, no, I want my daughter, to have the same kind of experience I have. And I said, no, not until this changes. You need to understand. So Anne, my sister, is a great mother, but she wasn't aware because the media that's supposed to do a good job to tell the truth, well, they're going into that direction, which is let's kind of twist it and change it and not talk about it. Or the 3-letter agencies that aren't telling the truth. Go ahead, Jordan.
How has this changed you? How is experiencing that material and having to play it out changed you?
I'd give my life in a heartbeat. Changed me. I'm less concerned about myself than I am about the hurt. I will tell you this right now. I would absolutely die. If this were to change the world and get rid of trafficking and pornography and all of the 8 arms of this octopus that has to be destroyed, the only way you can destroy it is take the head out. If that hit, I'd give my life for it in a heartbeat.